So you heard it, folks. He really knows what's going on. He's got a pretty good outlook.
I'm going to give Francisco, who's my partner in this journey, an opportunity to also give his background, because I think when you see how well we complement one another in terms of our vision, our understanding, both from a corporate perspective, public company perspective, as well as where the company can really leverage its what I describe as paradigm shifting platform technology, with some of Francisco's understanding of the applications, the leverageability of it. I think it's important to understand his background as well. So I'll turn it over to Francisco to give a little bit of background, and then we can move through the interview proceedings.
Great, thanks, Lance. Hi, guys. Yeah, so just to kind of echo some of what Lance was saying in terms of the technology, what really brought me into the company and interest was really my background in developmental biology, in terms of studying how genes and cells become different tissues in the body. And I began this work at City of Hope National Medical Center about 20 years ago, and under Jeffrey Mann's lab, who is a key opinion leader in primordial germ cell reprogramming. I found the value of stem cells in terms of what they could do therapeutically. From there, I left academia and went into industry. I founded my own company where I developed cell-based models for research uses. Shortly thereafter, I found and partnered with a few physicians into developing a program where you could actually translate a lot of this technology. I think the biggest issue that really pulls back the development and commercialization of stem cells is really getting it into the clinic. That's the key. You really have to show that the value is there for the patient, and ultimately develop a business model around that. That could accommodate the finances and the scalability of the product. So from there, we sought to develop cell-based therapies. I was involved in some cardiac trials, spinal cord injury models, back issues, as well as as we have BRTX 100, as well as some other orthopedic indications. I've published a lot of the work in preclinical models as well as in humans in my background. In addition to that, I've also have significant experience in developing intellectual property. I have over 20 issued patents related to cell-based therapies. I'm the inventor of the brown fat technology that we've developed here at BRTX. And I've translated BRTX 100 for the disc from what it was previously, which was used in humans, into the current product that we have today, and got it up to the point where we have our IND-enabled phase 2 clinical trial, which is pending to begin. So it's really exciting when you see that the cells and the products you make could actually translate into clinical benefits for patients. And that's something that we do have with BioRestorative moving forward. I think once we get into the clinic, you're going to see a lot of in terms of the potential, in terms of what we have in technology. This is only the first part of it that we've disclosed publicly. But underneath this, we have additional products that we're developing, and we would like to create a robust pipeline that'll add good value to the company.
To touch up, can you tell us if there's any more information about anyone else on the management side?
So we have a full team. We have people focused in quality control, facilities. We have a team of PhDs that assist on the scientific side. We have folks that are helping on the compliance and the controller / finance side to help us manage our books and making sure that we're compliant from a public company perspective. Obviously, everyone on this call is well aware that we went through this whole process of getting current. So it's a good opportunity for me to take the time right now to acknowledge those people that helped and got us there. It was a very long, heavy lift, as I like to say, and without the resources here at the company that we've become now a small family to really put us in a position to now go to the next stage of evolution. I want to take this opportunity to thank them for all their help.
Great. So to go on, one of the obviously bigger questions would be how you guys came out of bankruptcy last year. Would you be able to touch up on that?
Yeah, well, the company, declared bankruptcy in March of 2020, and the company. Well, I wasn't at the company at the time, so I don't know what was really going on at the company level or at the board level. But obviously, they were exploring all of their strategic alternatives and how they would go forward. And the two options they had, I believe, is they could emerge from through a Chapter 11 or a Chapter 7 liquidation. So I started to attend the hearings because I invested in the company pretty heavily, actually, and because I'm very passionate about the technology. And as I said before, the science is something I strongly believe in, but I didn't think that it was put in the right type of vehicle. So I was a creditor. I was on the calls. I was at the hearings. I was listening. I was reviewing some of the budgets that the management team had put forth. I had some critical commentary about some of those budgets. I reached out to some of the creditors that were also in the same position as me, and we very quickly came to a conclusion that I knew more about the company than anyone else on the phone, and that this was something that we all believed in from a scientific perspective, and that the only way to move forward and emerge from a Chapter 11 is to invest more money in the company and come up with a package to entice the creditors to vote for our plan of reorganization. So we created a joint plan of reorganization with the company and the board, which got support. We brought it through the judicial system, and the judge made it effective on November 16th, 2020. There's a lot of details and hours and minutia that goes on involved in every aspect of creating the joint plan of reorganization and what needed to be done. But for the purpose of this call, I'll just keep it at that level.
Great. Yeah, no, you touched up, I think, a perfect amount on that.
And just to be clear, I think it's a really good question. But to be clear, we satisfied all of our obligations. All creditors have been satisfied and settled. We gave creditors the option of investing in the company through a secured note or exchanging their claim into a number of shares based on a formula that we came up with. So, many people chose to take the shares. And I think that, when you look at the billion plus shares that were issued, that's all in connection with settling the creditor claims. And then there was a group of creditors, namely Octus and probably a handful of others, that wanted to remain with the company and invest in the company and help it emerge from Chapter 11. And for those investors, they invested through a secured convertible note. And so we have, two different aspects of how we treated the creditors. But I think we had a pretty unanimous vote in favor of the transaction, which is pretty telling. Even the judge, I mean, just to give you some behind baseball, the judge was very complimentary of the work. He said, not often does a company go into bankruptcy and emerge from bankruptcy in the way and the manner in which we did. He thought it was a testament to the company and the effort that was put in by the management team and all of the professional service providers. So it was a strong endorsement, and it was a good way to start.
Yeah, it really seems like you guys got the books in order. Yeah. So now we know a little bit more about the background and what's going on with you guys. One of the questions here is tell us a bit about BRTX and the two programs that the company has, BRTX 100 and Thermostern, starting with Thermostern. And then going on with that, tell us about BRTX and the hundreds of millions of Americans it can help potentially.
Sure. So I could do both of these, and I can do a pretty decent job. But I'm going to defer to Francisco to the extent that we have a group of PhDs on the phone and give him an opportunity to kind of talk in a little bit more detail about the science and the mechanisms and why it makes sense.
Hi, guys. So ThermoStem is our platform technology that is focused on the use of stem cells isolated from brown adipose tissue. Just quickly on a recap, brown adipose tissue, it's a organ or tissue type in the body that has a metabolic function. It's involved in energy expenditure energy usage instead of energy storage. So it's involved in the regulation of basically your metabolic system. And once that gets dysregulated, you begin to experience a number of symptoms that begins with a metabolic disbalance, and then it could lead to additional pathologies, which could be diabetes, some neurological disorders, some cardiovascular issues. So really the application can be used to treat a number of different indications. Obviously we need to focus on a handful in terms of what's valuable and low-hanging fruit in terms of success. So we've really targeted obesity, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and type 2 diabetes as our predominant targets. We've
collapsed markets, and just by the way, those markets are multi-billion-dollar growing markets. And in terms of the concentric circles within life sciences and medical technology, those are areas of focus for the country, for the world. I mean, these are problems that millions of patients suffer daily. So, and the incident rates on an annual basis continue to grow. So, these are really good targets for us to focus on. It makes a lot of sense, and it plays well with the application and the science that we have with respect to brown adipose.
Yeah, so we've had some very good collaborations at the University of Utah, University of Pennsylvania, where we've published a lot of preclinical work in terms of the value and the uses of the cells. We've completed proof of concept animal studies showing that the concept of transplanting brown adipocytes into an animal model can successfully basically remodel the metabolic disorder and take it back to a point where it's somewhat normal. Our data has shown that the animals can decrease in weight, lower glucose levels, as well as circulating triglycerides. So it's really a platform technology. As I mentioned, it has multiple applications. We have a very strong intellectual property positions. We are pioneers in the field. We're one of the first groups that have actually identified this cell type and uses. So really, it's really the sleeping giant of the company, I would like to say, because it's, once we have some, good financing behind this program, it's really going to launch it into a, multi, platform applications in terms of the uses, and it's very well protected from intellectual property. If you've been following a lot of, some of the disclosures that we've had, it revolves around this type of technology because we've been working, very, very hard in terms of protecting additional areas within it. We actually did a lot of work, including during bankruptcy. So during the bankruptcy process, the lab was still operating. We still had a tight budget, but we were able to continue to develop and protect the intellectual property, which obviously translate to, no abandoned patents. And there's no technology that has been abandoned or, let go. So all the value was retained and kept on growing. So we're pretty excited about the program. But really the lead program that we have is BRTX 100. It's our lead clinical candidate. It's focused on the use of autologous bone marrow stem cells that are cultured under low oxygen, so basically hypoxia. And the reason we do that is because the disc environment, which is in a damaged or degenerative form, has very low oxygen. There's very little blood flow to the disc. So when you inject cells in there that are cultured or expanded under normal oxygen conditions, they really don't survive, and they won't have the maximal therapeutic potential or output. So you have to acclimate the cells or get them really used to that environment. And the way to do that is by basically expanding them into a low oxygen environment and then transplanting the cells that survive into that disc. The exciting part about this really is that there's prior human data showing that cells cultured under hypoxia could actually have a therapeutic benefit. It's safe and it's feasible for human use. And actually, we published that work a few years ago with some of the work that we've done with our collaborators. So with that, we have a lot of positive feelings in terms of expectations that we're going to have some positive clinical outcomes once we start our trial. But it's pretty exciting. Both programs have a lot of potential to do a lot of good in terms of the patient population. Both of them have been really thought out well in terms of design and manufacturing. We have scalable models in terms of culturing the cells. The numbers behind it in terms of the financials to make the product are thought out as well. So we're pretty excited. We think that both programs are going to be a good value add for the company, and as we move forward, develop additional products in our pipeline.
The data that we have with some of the prior human experience that's like.
Right. So to touch up a little bit on some of the information I mentioned earlier regarding the prior human data, which is very compelling moving forward. And fortunately, a few times in biotech world, you have the ability to review prior human data and to kind of guide you in terms of your product development. And that's what we had with BRTX 100. The technology was actually in-licensed from a group in Colorado that was under the practice of medicine performing procedures using hypoxic cells. And they had very encouraging results, and they moved forward with developing intellectual property around that, which we in-licensed. Approximately 33 patients were treated. And the response rates were, very impressive in terms of the decrease in disability and a decrease in the pain scores that these patients experience. So it really allowed us to better design the phase 2 trial and basically set the targets where we could actually meet the outcomes. We've also, in that process, learned a lot in terms of how to better design the product, from a commercial perspective, once the product is approved. So we've really increased the potency of the product and developed it in a way that's actually scalable. Even though it's an autologous product, it's still scalable. We've managed to overcome that hurdle, and we think it's a good commercial model moving forward with this.
Any other questions?
There are a few questions. Give me just a moment and I will pull them.
While you guys do that, I'll follow up on number 6, which is we see that BRTX has the largest brown adipose bank in the world. Have you thought of developing partnerships with other companies? Actually, we have. As I mentioned, we're pioneers in the field. We're published as well. We have a very strong intellectual property position. And people, in terms of the scientific field and companies, they know who we are, that we exist, and that we have this technology. And currently, right now, we're developing the program to increase the value in terms of, what's the best way for, some strategic partnership. There's certain experiments and certain data sets that you need to, fulfill to really get the maximum output of it in these types of transactions. So that's currently what we're working on developing. But definitely, yes, it does make sense that, going forward, we look for some strategic partnership to help really, take it to the next step.
I think we've been on people's radar. We do explore strategic alternatives all the time. We feel like we're creating more value by keeping it within the four walls at the moment and home growing our IP position, as well as some of the experiments that Francisco just mentioned. At some point, we would encourage some of those discussions to evolve. But, as of now, I think where the value creation opportunity lies is, continuing to further develop it in-house.
Okay, I have a question from someone in the chat room. So it stated, those of us listening are mostly OTC traders willing to take a high risk with a ticker like BRTX. Certainly, we believe in the company and the direction you are bringing, but what is BRTX doing to attract the deep pocket and larger institutional investors to be the next round of buyers to take us to higher ticker prices and higher valuation for BRTX?
I think it's an excellent question because it's exactly part of the evolution of the company. And I apologize for using the word evolution so much, but that's kind of how we think about where we are and where we're going. It's a constant process of one step in front of the other. So part of the exercise of getting current was putting us in a position to now have conversations with financing sources. Now, I would love to comment and give you all the great detail of who we are talking to and what we're talking about and timing and all of that great stuff. But we don't comment on financing until financing is complete. But we've now put our company in a much better position than where we've ever been in the past to attract some of the larger, more fundamentally based institutional investors to give us the real scale that would be required in order to initiate our phase 2 clinical trial and further develop at the same time our brown adipose fat program. So these conversations have initiated. I cannot comment on who or when or how much. I think that in our public disclosure, we talk about our trial costing $12 million over 2.5 years. So I think I will tell you that we remain passionate and optimistic that this is something that we're going to see happen in the near term, and something that we intend to talk about quite a lot, because we're going to shift from being, like you mentioned, an over-the-counter, pink sheet traded company to a company that's valuation is more driven by some of the fundamental catalysts that are inherent in our technology and the progress that we make through the catalysts that we talk about along the pathway of our regulatory process as it relates to our phase 2.
Outstanding. I do have some other questions that DJ was going to cover. I'm going to bounce around because they make more sense, I think, in the way I'm going to ask them. So without revealing, what is your philosophy on the obstacles that you have overcome? Is there anything you would like to share about it?
You know, it's a interesting question, and for those of you on the phone that know me, you know that I don't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror, but often in situations like this, I think it's important to at least look back and see what the obstacles were and how you prosecuted those obstacles and where you can do better and where you can find ways or the right resources to either do it more efficiently or with better timing or with better disclosure. And there's one thing I sort of regret if I look back, and it's really trying to paint myself into a corner and nail down the exact timing of certain SEC disclosures. At some point, it just becomes out of your control. You could do everything in your power to make sure everything is prepared and filed and in the hands of the auditors and the accountants and the lawyers, but then it takes on a whole different world. So there was a moment in time where we missed, or we, unfortunately disappointed, I think, some of the people on the phone who thought that certain, SEC docs were going to be filed earlier, and they weren't. So I think just better communication, understanding what we can discuss, what we can't discuss, how the process works, taking risk in terms of, what we discuss, but not putting ourselves out there where we lose control over the process. So, but, for the most part, we like to learn every single day. We like to look back and understand our obstacles and how we've faced those challenges. But from a philosophical standpoint, we look out the front mirror, and we have a vision, and we are very determined to get to the next phase of our company's lifespan. And we know what that is, and we know what we need to do. And we know that we look much different now than the company ever has in the past. So therefore, as it relates to handicapping our probability of success, we feel a lot better.
Okay, that was perfect. Sorry, DJ was trying to test if he could hop back in, but he couldn't. So with those obstacles, there's more, obviously, when it comes to the clinical trials, hypothetically speaking, and either of you may know this, when you witness other trials, how long do they usually take?
Well, it really depends what phase you are in the trial and the indication that you're targeting. The trials can be as short as a year. I mean, we witnessed that with, Operation Warp Speed for the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, which there's ways you could design trials to collapse them and make them accelerated. Obviously, there has to be some circumstances you have to explain to the FDA why you're proposing a trial in that way. But it could range. They could be, as short as a year, as I mentioned, or they could be 3 years. It just really depends on the indication and, what you're looking at. A lot has to do with safety profile. This is, I think, the beauty of BRTX 100 is that it's an autologous product. It's yours. And it's safe from that point of view. We've already shown that. In terms of, satisfying long-term safety data, the FDA is going to have, a lot of hesitancy to go out, further than 2-3 years, with how we've designed it. That I think we've satisfied that.
Yeah, I think, I mentioned the time frame earlier. Based on our protocol and what we need to do, the trial should, and we intend it to be, a 2.5-year trial. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to shorten it. with good communication dialogue with the FDA. But that's what we're going to prepare for. And we have a lot of the work that's already, the pre-work that you would need to initiate a trial. We've done a lot of that work. So we have, negotiated largely a lot of the agreements with the service providers, the equipment manufacturers, the investigators. We've had these discussions. So I'm not suggesting that it will just be turnkey. We'll get the money in the account and we'll start. What I'm suggesting is we've gotten a lot of the heavy lifting out of the way. So there's just a minimal amount of work that needs to be done before we can really ramp up.
And that makes sense, seeing how COVID-19 impacted and the different emergency protocols to get other clinical trial companies out on the market. Francisco, what was your inspiration to ThermoStem?
So really, it was I was just researching just papers, and I found a paper in early 2010, 2009, where a group of investigators took brown adipose tissue from one mouse, and they transplanted that into another mouse that was obese, had diabetic symptoms in a mouse model. It had metabolic disorders, elevated triglycerides, glucose levels. And once they did the transplant, the mouse actually decreased weight. Basically, the glucose levels normalized, as well as the triglyceride levels, and basically ameliorated or cured what would be a cure the disorder of the metabolic disorder that it had. And that really opened up my eyes in terms of the potential. If we could just do brown fat transplants in people, you could get a similar outcome. That's how powerful this tissue is. Unfortunately, there's not enough brown fat in people that you could transplant into others. So the concept was, let's make stem cells and just make a whole lot of brown fat and transplant that. It seems very simple, but it's a very long, as well as developing additional applications for BRTX 100. We've been really focused on BRTX 100 from the clinical side and development, but there's a lot of other applications where this hypoxic cell that we have and the technology can be used to treat other orthopedic applications as well. So we're expanding and we're looking, but our main focus at the moment is really to initiate the phase 2 clinical trial.
It's fun. Yeah.
Okay, so going back,
And I would just add to that, from a personnel perspective, we had no issues whatsoever with respect to COVID-19. People came to the office. Our office is pretty well spread out. All of our PhDs and senior leaders have their own office space. We have a separate lab on premises. So everyone was masked up and gloved up and wore gowns and so on and so forth. But we did not experience any issues with respect to COVID-19. It only opened up our eyes to some of the potential of our technology from an application standpoint.
yeah, and obviously COVID-19's out of your hands, and you can't really expect that. Nobody did.
In fact, I think if we were prepared at the time to initiate our phase 2 trial, we would have had some issues with regard to manufacturing and just general availability of getting patients and having them feel comfortable going into a clinic at that time. So not that we want to delay anything further, but it did serve as a hindrance, I would assume, to other companies that were actively in trial at the moment.
Great. So I want to go back towards some of the share structure questions. There's a question about reverse split and if that was ever going to be considered and what price range maybe. I apologize if this was mentioned while I was absent.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I guess you all have a lot of experience with companies doing reverse splits and what that does. A reverse split for this company at this moment isn't something that we're really discussing or considering. But I will say that we do consider, financing and strategic alternatives all the time. I just putting the conversation off of BRTX for a second and just speaking more from like a banker's perspective than anything else. One of the reasons why you'd want to do a reverse split is to get your share price to the right level in order to get onto a national exchange. National exchange, like a NASDAQ, for example, would give you the opportunity to interface with about, 75 to 80% of the investors that you don't currently have access to today, which brings in more institutional money, more fundamental, perspectives of investing, gives you the kind of bulk size that you need to get into further trials down the road. So I'm not saying that we would never do a reverse split. It would be great if organically our stock price went from where it is today to a level that would meet the criteria for NASDAQ. That would be an amazing thing such that we wouldn't have to. But at some point in time, the goal for the company would be to move on to a national exchange. That would be one of our intents. So, at that moment, we would explore all strategic alternatives. And what would that split look like? What would be the ratio? I mean, it would be impossible to say that right now without knowing where we would be at that moment in time and what the stock price would look like. But, we would, if we went that direction, the split would just need to kind of get us the share price requirement based on that national exchange. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, great. Now there is a question about on your warrants, if there is any. So the question is, if there are outstanding warrants for people that buy shares that are multiples of the float, they can buy them and sell them at market prices, i.e., convert the shares for cash.
Yeah, so there are warrants. There are some warrants that are completely out of the money that date back to some of the pre-bankruptcy warrants. And then there are warrants that were given in connection with the emergence from Chapter 11. So there are, and you'll see it in the public disclosure, Octus and a handful of other investors who invested in the company. They received secured convertible notes, and they received an A and B warrant associated with that. Some of those warrants are freely tradable, and some are restricted and need to be registered. So, people have exercised their warrants and converted them into shares and have either held those shares or sold those shares. I think, people have seen that happening in the market. I don't follow the day-to-day trading as much as some of you guys do, but clearly the company has warrants. I don't know if we'll always have warrants, and I don't want to telegraph or lead people to believe that we're changing the structure, because that's not the case. But as we grow and as we have the need to bring in more institutional monies, they may take a look at the capital structure and say, hey, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense, and let's try to restructure it in a way to alleviate some of the pressure and give protection to all investors and put new fresh capital that's efficient, that's smart, and that's conducive to the growth strategy.
So with that being said, another question here is about, I guess, your timeline and any goals that may be expected to be reached, what that would be possible for shareholders to hear.
Timeline. So the next meaningful, we talked about some of the work that we've done in our manufacturing facility. So that's ongoing. We continue to get there as far as turning it into a commercial grade cell therapy facility. And I don't know if there's any more detail that we want to share on how that's progressing, but we probably can get that finalized within a quarter or two, right?
Quarter.
Yeah, a quarter. With respect to initiating the phase 2 trial, I guess that's like the the $15 million question. And, we haven't commented on when that's going to actually begin, because I think, not playing hide the ball or anything, but everyone knows that it's contingent on having the requisite capital to initiate. What's the number to start? Well, I'm not sure what that number is right this moment. I don't know that it's prudent to discuss what that number is at the moment. We're very well capitalized. We have cash on the balance sheet, as you see, based on our filings. And we want to raise enough money that we feel comfortable that we can initiate it, pay our vendors, but more importantly, have enough cushion such that we can call on the appropriate resources to give us the level of expertise required to successfully go through the trial. It's not a race to get into the trial. It's really about, once you're in the trial, making sure you're resourced appropriately and you have the right level of expertise to drive it, to make sure that you hit all the successful endpoints and catalysts that you set forth into your protocol.
Great. So another question here is in regards to your 10Q listed, an additional $45 million on top of the $12 million for BRTX trials. Is that the phase 3 cost? It wasn't quite clear.
Yeah, that's phase 3. So that is a number that we think it will cost to go through a phase 3. That is and look, I want to be clear. If we do what we think we can do in a phase 2 trial, and we put out the results that we expect to, and we hit our endpoints, and maybe even do a lot better than hit them, but really, show that this is super efficacious and safe, I don't think that there's going to be any issue with attracting a level of capital that would be required to enter a phase 3. I think, but for the purposes of our 10Ks and 10Qs, our auditors, our accountants, they want to know what the phase 3 trial would cost, so we give them a number. But I don't want that to feel like it's a daunting number for people where we sit today. Like I said earlier, one of the ways that we approach this company and our philosophy is one step in front of the other. We are focused on our phase 2, and that's the direction where we're heading.
Awesome. So another question here is, what makes BRTX different from any of the rest of the biotech field? There's a lot of failed companies. Essentially, what are you guys doing differently?
Well, I think it's really just our passion for the technology. So from a human resource standpoint, we're like a small family here. We believe in what we're doing. We're not going for what we believe is super complicated science and technologies. We're not using small molecules to cure cancer. We're not doing CAR T cells at this moment in time. We are really focused on what Francisco likes to describe as a mechanical issue with respect to the disc that we know how to fix. So I think that as you look at our programs and you weigh the probability of success vis-a-vis I don't want to say the competitors, but the general biopharma industry, it's much more attainable and much more intuitive, and it makes a lot of sense. And we think we can achieve the outcomes based on what we've learned today, and also, as Francisco mentioned, some based on prior human experience in animal models. So what we're attempting is not the triple Indy, but is actually something that's a very achievable event here, based on all of the knowledge that we have to date.
Yeah, so I mean, it's basically, when you're in science, or you look at anything in a scientific way, you kind of follow the data points, you follow the path in terms of where you want to get to. And with all the programs that we have in-house, that's our philosophy. It always has been, and that's the reason why we're even having this conversation. Because if that wasn't the case, we would never have exited bankruptcy in the way we did. So one of the key things with the BRTX is really the prior human data that's out there. that's been shown that not only is it safe, but there's some good positive clinical outcomes that have been observed. Now, obviously, a greater number of patients need to be or subjects need to be treated, so we could analyze, under a more statistical, rigorous method, the differences between getting treatment and not getting treatment, and which is what we're doing. But even if you look at some of the competitors out there that are in the space, which is one of them is being Mesoblast, which has a bone marrow product cultured and injected into the disc. And they've completed their phase 2 trial, and they had some positive outcomes. It just makes sense that this particular product that we're doing, which is also bone marrow stem cells, could have a probable outcome of clinical success. The key difference is we're using hypoxia. The disc is hypoxic, so that's what you should be doing. So I think we have a little bit more elegant approach in terms of the logic behind using our cell type. So we're pretty optimistic in terms of what we're doing in terms of generating a good clinical trial, the results, and moving forward into the phase 3.
So one of the last questions here is, are they just using brown fat or other materials with high mitochondria? And if it's a hypoxia situation, is nitrogen, or do you use other RxNS's increase? Sorry, I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so I could probably answer most of that. So the brown fat, they start as stem cells. So we actually use stem cells from brown fat tissue, which are a little bit different than other stem cells that are found in the body. And then what we do with these cells is we using certain chemicals and factors, we induce them or make them become brown adipocytes. So they have a lot of mitochondria. They express a protein called UCP1 that's involved in the characterization of the cell and its function. And so this is the cell that actually functions therapeutically in the body. We do have programs where we grow the cells under both normoxia and hypoxia. So we're studying the differences between both groups. And if you look at some of the intellectual property, we have both methods covered in terms of claims in issued patents. So yeah, we don't use any other factors that influence the cell culture. We do modify a little bit the pH as well. We work with the pH and osmotic pressure within the incubators.
Okay, so for the most part, that's pretty much all the questions. At this point, I want to just let you, if you have any more comments to make or any more outlooks you want to give us, and if anyone else has any final questions, they can post it in chat.
This is Lance. I would just like to say in conclusion, this has been a great experience for us to hear from all of you who have really supported our company for a long time now, prior to the bankruptcy, through the bankruptcy, and post-bankruptcy. We are doing everything we can to quote unquote make you proud and move this to another stage of its development. We find that in life, when you can do something as miraculous as help so many people using the technology that we have, and also make a little bit of money on the side, it's a perfect combination. So what we want to do is we want to continue to have these types of dialogues with you all, our investors, people that I think care about us for a variety of different reasons. Some are focused financially, some are focused on the cause. We're all in it together, and we really appreciate your support. And we really thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with us and ask some really awesome questions.
Yeah, it was great to have you guys here, and I'm sure we'd be happy to have you guys as you guys go along. And if there's any potential updates, we're looking forward to hear from you guys and see what you got to offer.
Thank you, everybody.